The world froze when every screen flashed breaking news. Michael Trent, an actor once adored for his magnetic charm, was no longer Hollywood's golden boy, but the center of a scandal. Reporters shouted, headlines screamed betrayal, and the audience gasped. The leaked audio played again and again, his voice breaking as he shouted in desperation, "You don't understand, this will ruin me." Each word cracked his carefully built empire. Cameras captured his mansion surrounded by flashing lights, the chaos spilling into every living room. Fans clutched their phones, disbelief turning into outrage. A judge's gavel echoed on television, a sound like thunder striking his career. Michael stood in the shadows, watching his legacy collapse in real time, his hand trembling as his phone lit up with unanswered calls. The story was no longer gossip. It was a nightmare lived in public. And then, the first revelation landed like a dagger. Michael Trent was not simply accused. He was at the heart of a crime no one had ever imagined. The chaos spread like wildfire. Within minutes, every social feed carried Michael Trent's downfall. People who once adored him now dissected his every word, replaying the leaked call like vultures circling prey. Commentators filled panels, their voices sharp, calling it the scandal of the decade. In Los Angeles, helicopters hovered over his mansion, beams of light slicing through the night. Michael sat in silence, staring at the news as if it were someone else's life unraveling. His assistant Daniel whispered, "Michael, you need to turn it off." But Michael muttered, "If I look away, it becomes real." His eyes were hollow, reflecting the burning headlines. Fans outside chanted his name, some in defense, others in accusation. The walls of his empire groaned under pressure, ready to shatter. No one knew the truth yet, but the world had already passed judgment. The phone rang again, shrill against the silence. Michael flinched but didn't answer. His reflection in the black screen looked older than he remembered, haunted. The voices on television replayed his desperate words, cutting deeper each time. His publicist Rachel stormed in, snapping, "We need control before this becomes unrecoverable." Michael whispered, "It's already too late." She glared at him, anger and fear in her eyes. Outside, camera flashes painted the night sky white. The sound of chanting grew louder, a mix of anger and disbelief. Rachel hissed, "You built this image. You don't get to walk away now." Michael's silence was an admission. The storm outside mirrored the one inside his chest. He was trapped. By fame, by lies, by the crime lurking beneath. Reporters gathered outside the courthouse, their microphones raised like weapons. The scandal had exploded beyond containment. Tabloids screamed betrayal. Primetime shows played clips of Michael's past interviews with cruel irony. His smile, once golden, now mocked him. Inside his mansion, he clenched his fists, memories of his rise flickering like ghosts. Rachel shouted on the phone, "No comment until I say otherwise." Daniel whispered again, "They won't stop." Michael stood, whispering, "It's not the world I fear. It's what they don't know yet." That line cut the silence, the unspoken truth hanging heavy. The headlines were brutal, but the secret beneath them was worse. The city buzzed with rumors. Cafes, taxis, late-night diners all echoed the same question. How could Michael Trent fall so far? The public replayed his old roles, his charming interviews, now painted with suspicion. In one diner, two strangers debated heatedly, one saying, "He's guilty," the other insisting, "Not until we know." Across town, Michael sat in silence, his eyes fixed on a single photograph of his younger self smiling at an award show. That boy had dreamed of glory, not ruin. He whispered to the empty room, "I don't know who I am anymore." Outside, the world decided for him. His name had become poison. His story no longer belonged to him. Long before the scandal, Michael Trent was the dream every studio wanted. He grew up in a small town, chasing auditions with nothing but hope and a broken-down car. His first role was minor, yet his charm stole the spotlight. By 25, critics called him the next leading man. Crowds screamed his name at premieres, his smile plastered on billboards. He laughed easily, loved deeply, and believed he was untouchable. Fame wrapped around him like a crown, and every headline painted him golden. But behind the applause, whispers of desperation followed him. He signed contracts without reading, trusted people who smiled too sweetly, and ignored the uneasy weight that followed him home. Success was addictive, and he couldn't stop chasing it. By 30, Michael was no longer just a rising star. He was the face of Hollywood itself. Award shows adored him, directors begged for him, and his charm won every red carpet. He carried himself with easy confidence, shaking hands, kissing cheeks, smiling until his jaw ached. Interviews painted him as humble, but inside he was terrified of slipping. Every room he entered seemed to demand perfection. His laughter echoed, but at night he stared into mirrors, afraid of being forgotten. Daniel, his assistant, often said, "You're untouchable." Michael only nodded, but inside he feared how fragile his pedestal truly was. The world saw perfection, but his private life was less flawless. Michael fell in love with Victoria Hale, a 34-year-old actress known for her beauty and sharp wit. She walked beside him with elegance, but whispers said her control ran deeper than affection. She critiqued his scripts, monitored his calls, and spoke to him with the authority of a director. In interviews, they appeared united, her hand gripping his tightly. Yet, when cameras left, her voice carried sharp edges. Friends noticed his silence, the way he deferred decisions to her. Love or manipulation, no one could tell. Michael himself wasn't sure. At parties, Michael played the charming host, surrounded by laughter and music. Champagne glasses clinked, voices cheered, yet his eyes always searched the room for reassurance. Daniel watched him closely, carrying out every whim, running interference when questions grew too sharp. Michael often said, "You're the only one I can trust," and Daniel forced a smile, hiding the truth. He was tired, drained, yet loyal. The glittering world they lived in was built on exhaustion and secrets. Every party hid more than it revealed, and Michael danced on the edge of shadows, never quite free, always dependent on the loyalty of others. Success reached its peak with awards stacked high and fans screaming louder than ever. Michael smiled on stage, holding trophies, yet doubt gnawed at him. Each acceptance speech carried rehearsed gratitude, but his voice trembled with hidden fear. Victoria whispered in his ear before every show, reminding him who guided his choices. Tabloids painted him as flawless, but behind that mask, exhaustion deepened. At home, he stared at his shelves of awards and muttered, "What if it all disappears?" The truth was, he had built his empire on shaky ground. All it needed was one spark to bring everything crashing down. The cracks in Michael Trent's empire began to spread. Tabloids caught him leaving late-night clubs, his eyes glassy, his smile forced. Paparazzi flashes turned every stumble into scandal. Victoria's grip grew tighter, demanding answers he could not give. Daniel begged him to slow down, whispering, "They're watching you unravel." Michael brushed him off, muttering, "They always want more." But the whispers turned to roars, rumors of debts, affairs, and lies. What once seemed like a golden life began to rust in public view. What? Every headline carved deeper into his mask, revealing a man unprepared for the weight of his own fame. Television interviews turned hostile. Once adoring hosts now asked pointed questions about rumors and betrayals. Michael laughed too loudly, his answers rehearsed but hollow. Victoria sat beside him, her smile strained, her hand squeezing his knee onto the table. Behind the cameras, producers exchanged knowing glances. Viewers noticed the cracks, the hesitation, the unease in his voice. Daniel replayed the footage later, whispering, "You don't sound like yourself." Michael slammed the remote down, shouting, "This is who I am." The silence that followed felt heavier than any accusation. The mask was slipping, and the world saw it happen in real time. Friends he once trusted sold stories to tabloids. Old photos leaked, grainy images of drunken nights and whispered deal. Michael confronted one of them at a private dinner, his voice breaking. "How much did they pay you?" The man looked away, guilt etched on his face. Victoria's anger flared, calling them vultures, but Michael knew the truth. Loyalty had a price. Daniel warned him, "They're turning your history into weapons." Michael stared at his reflection in a wine glass, muttering, "Maybe I gave them the ammunition." Trust had evaporated, leaving him surrounded by betrayal. Every ally became a potential enemy. The paparazzi grew relentless. Helicopters hovered over his mansion, cameras hidden in hedges. Headlines shouted his collapse before it fully arrived. Rachel, his publicist, stormed into his study shouting, "You can't hide anymore." Michael slammed his fist on the desk, replying, "I gave them everything. And it's never enough." Daniel watched from the doorway, silent, his loyalty cracking under the weight. The mansion felt less like a home, and more like a cage. Outside, the world roared louder. Inside, Michael whispered to himself, "One mistake, and they'll tear it all down." The tension was unbearable, the fall inevitable. And then it came, the call that changed everything. Late at night, his phone buzzed, the screen glowing in the dark. Michael hesitated, dread crawling through him. When he answered, a voice cold and sharp said, "We know what you did." His blood turned to ice. The line crackled with silence before cutting out. He dropped the phone, staring at it as if it might explode. Daniel rushed in, asking, "Who was it?" Michael whispered, "The end." In that moment, the world outside vanished. The secret he had buried was no longer safe. His life had just crossed the point of no return. The phone call was only the beginning. Within hours, encrypted emails leaked to journalists, linking Michael to secret financial accounts. The story was no longer about reckless fame. It was fraud. Victoria confronted him, her voice icy. "You told me everything was clean." Michael muttered, "It was supposed to stay hidden." Rachel pounded her desk, shouting, "You've given them the weapon they need to destroy you." Daniel stared, stunned by the depth of secrets buried. The world had seen scandal before, but this was different. This wasn't gossip. It was crime, deliberate and damning. The press exploded with revelations. Offshore accounts, secret transfers, and whispers of organized crime. Paparazzi no longer called him a fallen star. Now they called him a criminal. Reporters demanded answers, their microphones jabbing like knives. Michael stood before a mirror, whispering, "How did it get this far?" Daniel pleaded, "Tell them the truth," but the truth was a labyrinth he could not escape. Victoria's eyes narrowed, her silence more dangerous than words. She had known, perhaps always. Her loyalty was a mask, and now Michael feared she might be the one pulling it away. Investigators swarmed his world. Subpoenas arrived like daggers. A detective, Evelyn Cross, relentless and precise, declared on live TV, "We're uncovering the truth." Michael's empire trembled as headlines screamed fraud, betrayal, and crime. Rachel begged him to fight back, but he whispered, "What if they find everything?" Daniel's loyalty wavered, fear replacing devotion. Victoria remained silent, her smile too controlled. The mask was finally torn. Michael realized this was no longer about reputation. It was survival. The world wasn't just turning against him. The law was closing in. Whispers spread that Victoria herself had fed evidence to investigators. Michael confronted her in their mansion, his voice breaking, "You betrayed me." She smiled coldly, replying, "I protected myself." The words sliced deeper than any headline. Daniel stepped back, realizing he had witnessed the fracture of something powerful. Michael's empire had not fallen from outside forces alone. The betrayal came from within. The one woman he trusted most had twisted the knife. The mansion, once filled with glamour, echoed only with rage and silence. The truth was more poisonous than scandal. Betrayal had always lived beside him. The story the world thought they knew was shattered. Michael Trent was not only a fallen actor, he was entangled in fraud, betrayal and crime that reached beyond Hollywood. Detective Cross declared, "This isn't just about fame. This is about corruption." Fans sat stunned, realizing every smile, every interview, had been smoke hiding fire. Michael sat alone, head in hands, whispering, "It was never supposed to come to this." The twist had broken him. His empire was gone. His allies had vanished. And the truth, darker than any scandal, had finally dragged him into the open. The sirens came first, red and blue bleeding across the mansion walls. Michael Trent stood frozen as officers pounded on his door. Cameras swarmed outside, their lenses capturing every heartbeat of his downfall. Daniel shouted, "Michael, you need to move." But his legs betrayed him. Rachel screamed at reporters through the window, her voice drowned out by chaos. Michael whispered, "Not like this," as handcuffs clicked around his wrists. The flashes from paparazzi lit his bowed head like a stage spotlight. Hollywood's golden star was no longer untouchable. He was a prisoner, and the world was watching. The courtroom was a circus. Reporters filled every seat, cameras rolling as though it were a movie premiere. Michael entered in a dark suit, his eyes hollow, his posture defeated. Victoria sat apart, her gaze sharp and distant, the betrayal heavy in the air. Detective Evelyn Cross stood tall, presenting evidence with clinical precision. Rachel whispered, "Fight back," but Michael only stared at the jury, lost in silence. The judge's gavel echoed, each strike a coffin nail for his empire. The star once adored was now a symbol of corruption, his life dissected before the world. Every headline screamed his ruin. Fallen idol, Hollywood's fraud, the star who lied. Outside the courthouse, protesters gathered, some shouting for justice, others weeping in disbelief. Daniel pushed through the crowd, clutching his head, overwhelmed by guilt. He had enabled Michael's choices, and now he watched the collapse unfold. Inside, Michael muttered, "They'll never forgive me." Rachel snapped back, "They don't need to forgive you. You need to survive this." But survival felt impossible. Each accusation dug deeper, stripping away the last fragments of his image until nothing was left but shame. The betrayal came sharpest from Victoria. On the witness stand, she spoke with practiced calm, detailing secrets Michael thought buried. Each word cut him open before the jury. He stared at her, whispering, "Why?" But she never looked his way. Daniel lowered his head, unable to watch. Rachel slammed her fist into her notes, whispering curses under her breath. Evelyn Cross listened with steady resolve, her case tightening like a noose. Michael's empire collapsed not in fire but in silence, dismantled piece by piece by the woman who once shared his bed. The verdict landed like a blade. Guilty. The word echoed through the courtroom, each syllable shattering Michael's last illusions. Gasps erupted, cameras clicked, and headlines spread instantly across the globe. Michael closed his eyes, whispering, "It's over." But in the silence that followed, he realized the truth. This was not the end. The collapse of his career was only the beginning of his ruin. His empire lay in ashes, his friends gone, his lover turned executioner. As guards led him away, the world stared, hungry for the fall. Fame had made him untouchable. Betrayal had made him mortal. The mansion that once hosted dazzling parties now stood silent, its corridors echoing only with emptiness. Michael Trent returned briefly after sentencing, escorted by officers to collect personal belongings. The chandeliers no longer sparkled. Dust covered the trophies once polished for display. He paused in the living room, where laughter had once spilled across golden floors. Daniel stood nearby, unable to meet his eyes, his loyalty shattered by exhaustion. Rachel refused to enter the house, telling reporters, "There's nothing left here worth saving." Michael whispered to himself, "All this for nothing." The silence weighed heavier than the screams of his trial. Fame had built these walls, but betrayal left them hollow. Outside the gates, fans who once screamed his name had vanished. Only a few stragglers lingered, holding torn posters, their faces filled with bitterness. The media trucks were gone, leaving silence in their place. Michael looked out at the street, remembering nights when crowds begged for autographs. Now, no one reached for him. Victoria's betrayal still echoed in his mind, her final words slicing through every memory they shared. Daniel muttered, "They don't care anymore," and Michael replied, "They never did." He turned away, shoulders bent under the truth. Fame had been a storm, and now only wreckage remained in its path. The courtroom may have closed, but whispers of his crimes spread endlessly. Talk shows dissected his every mistake, documentaries prepared to cash in on his downfall. Michael watched a late-night host mock him with cruel laughter, the audience roaring at his expense. He turned off the TV, his reflection in the dark screen a stranger. Rachel called once more, begging him to issue a statement of redemption, but he let the phone ring. Daniel muttered, "They'll never stop." Michael answered quietly, "Neither will I." The fire inside him had not died, only smoldered. Ruin had not broken him, it had transformed him. Daniel finally broke, confessing to a reporter that he had covered for Michael's lies for years. His voice trembled as he admitted, "I thought I was protecting him." Michael read the article in silence, feeling both betrayal and pity. Daniel had been his shadow, his enabler, but now he was free of him. Alone in the dark, Michael whispered, "Even loyalty burns." The people closest to him were gone. Rachel had disappeared into new clients. Victoria had carved a new reputation from his ashes. Daniel had confessed his sins. What remained was only Michael, facing the ruins of his choices. At last, silence became his companion. The world had moved on, new stars rising, new scandals taking headlines. Michael Trent walked alone through a deserted park at dusk. No cameras, no fans, no cheers. He paused on a bench, watching the sun sink behind the city skyline. His whisper carried into the empty air, "This is the price." He no longer belonged to Hollywood, nor to its glittering illusions. His empire had collapsed, his story rewritten by betrayal and crime. But in the fading light, his figure remained, broken, yes, but still breathing. The ashes of a legend lingered in silence. The courthouse steps echoed with silence when Michael Trent appeared once more. This time, not as an idol, but as a relic. The cameras returned briefly, capturing a broken man walking free under conditional release. His suit hung loose on his frame, his eyes shadowed by sleepless nights. Reporters shouted questions, but he ignored them, his footsteps heavy. Daniel, now distant, watched from the edge of the crowd, guilt weighing him down. Rachel refused to appear, unwilling to face the ruins she had once managed. The world moved past him. But Michael's name still carried venom. He was no longer a star, he was a warning. Late at night, Michael wandered into a diner, the kind of place he once visited before fame found him. No one turned their heads this time. The waitress poured coffee without recognition, her indifference cutting deeper than any insult. He stared at the steam rising from the cup, remembering premieres, red carpets, and adoring fans. Now, anonymity was his new reality. He whispered, "This is what freedom feels like," but the words carried no conviction. Fame had been a cage, but it had also been love, and losing it left only emptiness. The silence of obscurity was colder than the noise of scandal. Victoria Hale thrived in his absence. Magazines showcased her on red carpets, smiling as if untouched by scandal. Michael saw her face on a passing billboard, her beauty framed as resilience. He whispered bitterly, "She rewrote the story." The betrayal stung sharper now that she stood victorious, while he drowned in shadows. Detective Evelyn Cross gave interviews, praised for exposing corruption. Daniel vanished from public view. Michael, once the center of attention, was erased, replaced by those who had shaped his downfall. The crime had destroyed him, but it had crowned them. Fame had abandoned him to eternal silence. Michael sat in his dark apartment, walls bare, awards pawned or stolen by time. He replayed his old films, watching his younger self laugh and charm audiences. Tears streaked his face as he whispered, "I don't know that man anymore." The screen flickered, illuminating his hollow eyes. For a moment he reached toward the image as if touching the past could save him. But the ghost of fame vanished when the credits rolled. The silence afterward was unbearable. He realized that the greatest betrayal had not come from Victoria or Daniel. It had come from himself. The final chapter came not with screams, but with silence. Michael Trent walked out of his apartment one evening, coat pulled tight against the cold, and disappeared into the night. Some claimed they saw him boarding a bus out of Los Angeles. Others whispered he vanished for good. The media speculated, fans debated, but no one truly knew. The last words he left in a discarded notebook read, "In the end, I wasn't destroyed by my enemies. I was destroyed by myself." The chilling truth echoed like a final heartbeat. Michael Trent was gone, leaving only shadows of what he once was.